So today we're going to be looking at a scenario where the Soviet Union comes back in 2022. This is going to be the core territory of the Soviet Union. None of these Eastern Bloc countries, only the core satellites. So if you guys enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new, and let's go ahead and jump right into this video. Now this is what I would consider to be the core Soviet territory here, but you might be saying like, oh, the Baltics were a part of it. But they were kind of achieved through World War II, and I don't know, I don't think it really counts as a core territory. So yeah, the Soviet Union is going to be appropriately represented by the color of red throughout this entire video, so just keep that in mind. And they're also going to be buffed a little bit just so it makes the video more interesting. Anyway, let's go ahead and kick off this video with a Soviet-Finnish war. We see Soviet troops push over into Finland, but they are eventually met with a stalemate, and it's going to stay this way for a little bit. Next up on the Soviet Union's hit list is invading all of the Baltics. Now keep in mind in this video that NATO does not exist, as well as the EU and the UN. A majority of my videos will not feature any of those organizations, just to make the video more interesting. So NATO does not exist, but we might see something like it form up. So we see Soviet troops pushing to Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia all at the same time. The first of which to fall is Lithuania, followed by Latvia, and eventually Estonia surrenders. And with that, in the peace treaty, we see full annexation of the Baltics, so they did so successfully. And now Russia sets its eyes on Poland. But because this is an AdizzPro video, Germany is going to be helping out Poland, just because this is an AdizzPro video, and also, how funny World War II mean. It really isn't even that funny anymore. I don't know why I'm doing this to myself. So we have German and Soviet troops pushing into Poland on both sides, and this place folds pretty quickly. And just like that, for like the third or fourth time in history, Poland no longer exists. Unfortunately for the Soviet Union though, we do see a new military pact form up in defense against the Soviet Union, and the founding country, not surprising at all, is the United States. So with this, we have a lot of powerful European countries joining in, as well as the US, Canada, so the UK, France, a lot of Central Europe, and Turkey. And these countries basically just made one big defensive pact, so if any of them gets invaded, then they will all retaliate against the Soviet Union. So the USSR does the smart thing and just kind of avoids Europe for a little bit. Instead, they set their sights down south on Iran. So from here, we see the Soviet Union pushing down into northern Iran, and the same can be said on the other side, creating a second front. Luckily for the Soviets, Tehran is pretty close to the Caspian Sea, and which means they're pretty close to the Soviet Union, so they push across and capture the city. Now, Iran is very mountainous, and especially over here in this region, so the Soviets are just gonna kind of ignore that region. Instead, they swoop down as the Iranian military kind of retreats to these mountains. Also, no nuclear bombs are being used in this video. As for all of my videos, nuclear bombs just kind of end the video early, so that's not really interesting, and I don't know why I would do that. Anyway, the Soviet Union has just met with the Persian Gulf, which means that they're having a lot of success. So much so that the Iranian military flees to these mountains, and eventually peace is signed. Taking a look at said peace treaty, we see that the Soviet Union takes over a majority of northern Iran and makes a puppet over here in the east. The rest of Iran is left, but this peace is kind of weak. It has some cities and ports along the Persian Gulf, but other than that, they aren't really as strong as they used to be, so they opt for unification with Iraq. And from here, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the Finnish front up north. Nothing has changed. Luckily though, over here, Mongolia finally gets accepted into the USSR. So yeah, Mongolia just kind of opted to join the USSR. They weren't really set a ultimatum or anything. They were just like, hey, can we join? And they got accepted. So now the Soviet Union is looking as big as ever, and this is probably them at their territorial height. I know the Soviets won China Manchuria, and I'm honestly not going to do that in this video just because that would be a pain for them to fight China, and it would probably just be a stalemate and get boring pretty quickly. So from here, we see the Soviets kind of just form like a isolation period where they just kind of don't do anything and don't really have any relations outside of their allies. And during this time, we see some pretty interesting changes. First off, we see Afghanistan join Pakistan, and a kind of a act of desperation. They need a government to kind of help them out, so they go ahead and unify with Pakistan. We also see the Middle East form into one big blob over here, except for Israel, because Israel is Israel, which eventually leads Israel to join in on the side of this defensive pact. As for the Finnish-Soviet war, once again, nothing has changed, although we do see the Finnish pushing back the Soviets a little bit up here in the north. And other than that, we really don't see that much changes, other than Japan joining in on the side of the yellow team. But yeah, this is kind of a stalemate world. Of course, we have the introduction of a new superpower, which is something that all the world should be worried about. I think that eventually a Chinese-Soviet war would happen, but I'm not going to cover that in this video because, like I said earlier, I gave my reasons earlier. And yeah, so let's go ahead and kick off a major event. Said major event is over here in the region of Turkey, where some Russian troops and Turkish troops get into a little bit of a skirmish. It is unknown what really happened or who pulled the trigger first, but this does set off a war between Turkey and Russia, which leads to the rest of the yellow team joining in on the side of Turkey. So just like that, the major conflict of this video has just broken out. First off, we see Russian troops pushing into northeastern Turkey, and Russian troops pushing into Slovakia and Czechia in order to cut off Czechia from the rest of their allies. The Their plan goes successfully and Czechia is split and Slovakia is annexed. From here, Russian troops push into Hungary and Romania, and overall we see a lot of Soviet success in this war. Although on the flip side, we see Japanese, Canadian, and American troops taking over some parts of Russia over here. This includes these islands and this bigger island, which I forgot the name of. From here, a landing is made in southern Siberia and a push up north to start it, although this really doesn't have a point as this land is kind of useless to Russia anyway. They then make a landing over here in eastern Russia, which is a little bit more populated and secured, so they have a little bit of trouble fighting over here, but eventually they wipe out all of the area and start a push up north. Meanwhile, back over in Europe though, Czechia is wiped out, and Hungary and Romania are both near capitulation. So the Soviet Union is going to be fighting a two-front war here. They're going to have to deal with the Americans and the Japanese over here in the east, and then the Europeans over here in the west, but it really shouldn't be that bad for them. This area over here is pretty empty, and it would take the blue team a little bit of time to push over until a point where they would actually be in danger. And other than Turkey and Finland, they really have nothing to worry about over here in the west. So the Soviet Union continues their push into Turkey and manages to capitulate both Romania and Hungary. Up north, the Finnish push back and push into Soviet territory up north. Down south, Turkey continues to be invaded until their capital is eventually captured, which leads to the capitulation of the country. And just like that, the Soviets have pretty much won the west. In the east, the blue team continues to make progress against a pretty undefeated Russia, but like I said earlier, this land really isn't that valuable. So after managing to somewhat secure all of Siberia, Russia really doesn't really care. And we are left with a very large front line, which is very hard to maintain for the blue team. But yeah, that front is no longer moving. The Soviet Union's next move is kind of foreseen, but they invade the Middle East. Now this is mainly to secure a better oil supply, but it is also to take out Israel. So pushing in on all fronts, the Soviet Union finds this invasion pretty easy. They push down the Mediterranean coast and eventually meet northern Israel, where they kind of face some problems. But other than that, they have really no problem taking out Iraq and Syria. Eventually, the Middle East is split into two. The Iraqi and Iranian parts are both cut off and encircled, and the Jordanese, Israeli, and Palestinian parts are the only parts that remain. But surprisingly to everyone, but probably not really because this region is known to do weird things, we have Saudi Arabia joining the war on the side of the blue team. Now, this is to mainly secure their relations with the West, but is also to kind of push back Russia and show that they are a force to be reckoned with. So while the Soviets were rearranging their troops over here, we do see Saudi Arabia push across and into the Iranian and Iraqi parts. Eventually, they meet up with Israeli forces and manage to push back the Soviets. From here, a pretty hard stalemate is met and no progress is made. Over in Finland, the Soviets manage to push out the Finnish, and white peace is signed. From here, this Soviet war is pretty much a stalemate. They managed to push back the blue team in the south. They took over a big part of Jordan and northern Israel, but other than that, no progress is made. And it is here that the blue team comes up with a compromise. Basically, they're allowing all of Slovakia and Hungary to be annexed by the Soviets, but in exchange, they must leave alone Turkey and Czechia, and also cede over Japan's old territory over here in the east. Reluctantly, they actually agree. So taking a look at the final treaty of this video, this is what we have. Slovakia and Hungary are both annexed by the Soviet Union, which kind of works out for them because they could then invade Croatia and then have all of the Balkans down here to themselves. They'd probably be able to take out all of the former Yugoslav areas and then maybe push into Albania, Romania, Bulgaria, and Greece. They might have to leave Turkey alone, but this land over here alone is valuable enough. We can also see the Soviets pushing into Czechia and Austria potentially, and maybe even Italy. If they really wanted to, they could keep expanding west until they met the French border, which then they would probably have some troubles. But anyway, discussing the peace deal, down here in the south we have Israel, a part of Jordan and Saudi Arabia left alone. Turkey itself is fine, but we have the majority of the Middle East being puppeted and Russia taking over a little bit down here in Iran. Over here in the east, we have Japan taking back this longer island and these archipelago of islands right here. So yeah, thank you guys for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. 25,000 subscribers is coming up real soon, and I'm looking forward to hitting that with you guys. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.